made. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm seeing a little thing pop up. Once the field was made, I felt that, I had a really strong shot, and all of the polling has indicated that I'm in the top three campaigns as we head into the last 3 weeks of the election cycle. And my reasoning was very simple. In the last primary cycle, APAC, I was the only candidate in the entire state of Illinois that APAC targeted. And in this election cycle, there is a candidate that APAC is endorsing, and there is a candidate that APAC is opposing because they do not want me to go to Congress. I think in elections where we see this many candidates, which, by the way, fabulous list of candidates at Illinois 7. It's been a very exciting primary for me to hear the platforms of everybody. But you have new candidates, you have electeds, and then you have a movement builder. And I'm a movement builder with a track record. And I knew that that was the energy and the story that we would bring to Illinois 7.
Um, so just to summarize that, your basic way of distinguishing yourself from the other candidates is feeling like you're the most progressive
I,
of
I
them.
think that we are the biggest threat to the opposition that needs to be built against the Trump administration and against big money that is trying to pour into Illinois politics. Otherwise, they would not be spending money or had spent money against us. As you know, Marianne, as you highlighted, I've not been elected to any position. I am a daughter of the West Side of Chicago. I'm a community organizer. I've had the opportunity to serve as in nonprofit executive leadership. I am the average voter in Illinois 7. Um, and so I do think that the distinguishing thing about our campaign is that we are a threat to the status quo. Many of you in Indivisible who helped in previous election cycles, the president of the United States, only Joe Biden, only endorsed in three Democratic primaries in that 22 election cycle, and Illinois 7 was one of them because of the field program and the pressure that we were putting on a 30-year sitting incumbent. And so I think that that is what makes me different, that I'm a movement builder and I have a track record to back that up.
Thank you. The As you know, I mean, we all know the seventh district is
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing you, Marianne.
really. Let's see.
Okay,
Everybody
there you
else?
go. There you
Yep.
go.
Okay.
Better.
Okay, great. The seventh district has some of the widest wealth and health disparities in the country. Gold Coast on the north side there, and West Gellerfield Park west. So how does your platform specifically bridge that gap? And what are a few day one federal priorities that you believe would have the most immediate impact for the seventh district specifically?
Well, I mean, of course, this was one of my major reasons for running. Before I ran, I was a national organizer with Physicians for a National Health Program, where I trained 20,000 doctors and medical students across the country to advocate for a single payer universal healthcare system. As we know, in the United States, we are the only developed country without a universal healthcare system. And my first commitment to the people in Illinois 7 is that I will not accept any corporate PAC money from big pharmaceutical and private insurance companies that lobby to kill bills like the Medicare for All bill to move us forward into a transition of single payer. The second thing is, I believe in metrics. I believe we can't change what we can't measure. And in my first 100 days in office, I want to put together a healthcare and life expectancy task force of people across the Illinois 7, people who are experts like the physicians, people who are activists and organizers, environmentalists, so that we can rank the priorities of what we need to go to Congress to make the case in appropriations to bring that federal funding back to Illinois 7. There are communities where you can live a very long time past the national average. And then there are communities where that is cut significantly short. And so I want to make sure that we have a representation of people across the district that co-govern with me to close and chip away at that 30-year gap. And I think it's a strong case to be made. And that's going to require, and the third thing is because we are in, goofy season with the Trump administration, that we are going to have to work very closely with the Pritzker administration, Tony Preckwinkle Preckwinkle and the Cook County Board to salvage as much resources as possible to make sure that we're expanding care for people across the district. But my first line of business is going to be to protect the ACA.
That's pretty clear. Um, uh, can you can you imagine who your allies might be? I mean, you mentioned healthcare organizations, Cook County Board. What about, specifically thinking about that coalition partners on the northern part, in the Gold Coast section,
Yeah, I
those
mean,
people.
that was the great part of working at PNHP. It was a network of 20,000 doctors, and there's the Illinois Single Payer Coalition that happens. There are amazing organizations like Access Living. There are great organizations on the ground doing environmental justice work, relationships that I've built with groups like the Sunrise Movement. So I think that nationally and locally, I've had a very rare experience where I've been able to have people coalesce around me to help leverage me in the field. And I've had them to work and serve as partners in single issue campaigns that didn't deal with election cycles. And so these are folks who I consider my siblings in the movement. So of course, we want physicians and nurses. My previous campaign chair was Martise Chisholm. She's the former president of the Chicago chapter of National Nurses United, and Bernie Sanders delegate, and a feisty nurse, might I add, who the folks who've been able to hold me accountable in this process have also been able to teach me. So I think I'm willing to sit with a myriad of groups, but I'm very fortunate that on the national level and the local level, I've built a very strong coalition and network of siblings across the progressive movement, the healthcare movement, the environmental justice movement, the gun violence prevention movement, right? Which is the work that I have always done. And that those relationships come in handy when you take on a really big task of a 10-year goal to chip away at a 30-year life gap. But that is a worthy cause that I know these groups would want to take with me and be a part of.
Um, and to a difficult question here. Obviously, we're here with all these progressive candidates for the seventh district. And in the last few weeks, people are getting very nervous over the six-way ticket split among the progressive, not to mention the non-progressives. Um, do you see this as a problem? And if not, why not?
I mean, it's always a problem, right? When progressives don't coalesce around each other. And I mean, this is why we started 6 years ago, Marianne, because I knew that this district was a mammoth of a district. And if you know the political history, some of the hardest places and electorates to crack through are older Black voters on the West Side and South Side. They have to see you several times. They have to see you for years. You have to show up to their churches and the cookouts and the neighborhood block cleanups. They have to be able to see your face and put the name to the face in order to gain some of those votes. And so, I feel confident going into election day because of how high and strong the name recognition is across the district. Would I like to see progressives consolidate? Absolutely. But I think that anybody who came into this race 6 months ago, no matter how much money they raised or what endorsements they get, and they think that they can just win this big district from Westchester to West Englewood in 6 months, it is unrealistic. And I've had some of those conversations with some of the other candidates, and I deeply respect and understand why some candidates want to stick it out. But I don't know if you all paid attention to New Jersey 11, but a very similar situation happened in New Jersey 11 where we got Analia Mejia. Thank goodness we got her. But it was a race where there were 12 candidates in the race. This unknown progressive, well, she had a bit of name recognition because she was a Bernie Sanders delegate and all of those things and worked in his camp. Um, and then there was a candidate that APAC attacked and a candidate that APAC endorsed. And right now, what we're going through in our district is you have the two top moderate candidates. LaShawn K. Ford and Melissa Conyers Irvin going negative on TV on at each other. And then you have us, the only progressive ranked in the top three in this race. And I think we are going to surge as we hit into election time. People are looking for an anti-establishment candidate that is grassroots, that is unbought, unbossed, and who they know. And so I think we've really established that brand for ourselves um, in the district, and I'm proud of that. But I'm not, I can't say that I am so worried that I don't think we can pull it off. I think it's going to be tight, but I think that we have the best shot to do it.
Well, let me just ask if you had to support another candidate in this race, if you're forced to by some, thought experiment, would you be willing to say who that would be?
Yes, I will. I like Dr. Fisher. I came in and I said that healthcare was a big issue for
Mhm.
us in the district. It is. I think he has a lot of integrity. I like him a lot. Smart man. And he's run a very positive campaign. So Dr. Fisher, if I had to choose, if I was not in the race, Dr. Fisher would be my choice.
And just Eric here, just as a quick disclaimer to everybody, right? We're asking that one to everybody.
Yeah.
So just yeah, just so everybody knows, right? We didn't just put Keen on
I
the
hope I,
spot.
I
Thank you.
hope I get some votes from my fellow colleagues.
Yeah, thank you so much for being honest. Anyways, I'm jumping
Yes,
out.
appreciate that.
Mhm.
Um, can I just follow up on your question about some polling that's shown you as number three? Personally, I'm not familiar with that polling and I haven't seen it, and I'm wondering where maybe other people on this call have seen it, but if you can explain where that came from.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Fisher actually dropped some of his internal polling. And obviously polling is set forth. It kind of, you, if you do it internally, you leverage it to obviously see if there's a pathway for you.
Mhm.
And that was what his poll aimed out to do. But from the raw numbers, as I mean, it was done a little while ago in January. Um, it had me, LaShawn, and Melissa in the top three, and then everyone else kind of afterwards. And I mean, that makes sense because we have the most name recognition of candidates in the race. I'm the only candidate who is a non-elected that has run the span of the district multiple times, right? So you can go to any corner of this district and people would be familiar with me. But what it also just showed was that it's anybody's game still. I mean, it was a very large undecided population of voters. And there are some independent internal polls that I have seen where it was reflected that Melissa, LaShawn, and I were in the top three. So, I
Okay,
mean,
well,
there have been several that I've seen that are not public yet, or I don't know if those entities will make it public. But what I can say is that no one should be shocked by that. I think polls are a snapshot of time. They mean nothing if you don't get on the doors and you don't make the phone calls and you don't get in front of the people and have a strong message for folks to get behind. But I think it is very valuable that there are no other progressive names up there except for ours. And so
yeah, okay,
people can
just
take,
curious.
yeah, they could take with that and do with that what they will.
I appreciate that. Um, uh, okay, here's some other next question is you've done a lot of organizing, obviously, over the years with everybody from Gen Z activists to union members, especially older members. So how do you imagine bridging the gap between those two groups that don't always necessarily see eye to eye?
You got to sit them down. You got to create the space. We build it and the people come. And the beautiful thing about our district is that it is a fighting district. People do and would love to engage with their neighbors. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity because now we're ushering in a new leader. And so there's going to be a lot of appetite to find out who this new leader is. How do neighbors get plugged in? And I think we do that through a myriad of ways. And one of those ways is that I do want to improve constituent services across the district. And that includes frequent town halls. That includes deep canvassing year round, where it's not just during election time where we're knocking on your door to ask for a vote, but we're knocking on your door to say, hey, how can our congressional office help you? Do you need help with anything? Can we plug you into the state senator or the state rep? And I think that those organic grassroots organizing tactics give people the opportunity and community to meet each other. One of the things that we're notoriously known for in our campaign is every election cycle, these house parties, right? And people opening up their homes to talk about the tabletop issues. And in those ways, I see us bridging the gap with not just older and younger, but a multiracial coalition, which our district represents. And so, as an organizer, one of the things that you're taught is to facilitate these spaces so that we can share these ideas, but most importantly, Marianne, so that we can build power as a district. My goal is not just to win this seat. My goal is to turn Illinois 7 into the organizing hub of the Great Lakes. We know that a Democrat is going to win this seat. It matters who that Democrat is. And we need to elect an organizer in chief, in my opinion, someone who's going to have our young people, older people, young at heart folks phone bank, write postcards, door knocks, get on a bus, go to Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, door knock, and win those seats back. And I think that we could outsource that and be a model for that here in the Midwest. Um, we have great progressive electeds across Illinois, and I think that all it's going to take is a little bit of elbow grease to coordinate that. And I want to make Illinois 7 the organizing hub of the Great Lakes.
Very ambitious.
No biggie.
Um, Looking back on all your organizing experiences, can you probably had to compromise once in a while, maybe with that bill you brought to the legislature. Um, uh, in general, can you tell me about a time you had to compromise on a policy goal to get the ultimate win, and how you justified that to the people who your supporters might not have?
Yeah, I mean, I think some folks who followed my career have heard this before, but I co-authored the Illinois Council on Women and Girls Act after the White House Council, President Obama's White House Council on Women and Girls was wiped out after the first Trump administration. And I knew there was all these talks about a federal and national ban on abortion. And I knew that Illinois was not going to go for that. I knew that we were going to be a haven state. And I was also kind of stunned that we didn't have a nucleus for women to have a voice in the state legislature, and essentially politicians writing policy about us without us at that table. And at the time, Bruce Rauner was the governor, believe it or not. And I wrote the Illinois Council on Women and Girls Act. Anna Moeller from Elgin carried it in the House, and Jackie Collins, a lioness of the Senate, state Senate from the South Side of Chicago, carried it in the Senate. And we had so many protections in there: reproductive health care, closing the pay wage equity gap. I mean, you name it. But we also have civil rights protections in there, like including the transgender community and non-binary folks who identify as non-binary. And that made some Republicans feel very uncomfortable about that. And so, luckily, my bill went to committee and it passed through committee, but the Republicans made a vow that because I wouldn't remove the transgender language amended, that they would put it on a hot list and have Republicans vote no on it. And so I traveled to 68 counties out of 102 across the state of Illinois, meeting with Republican women and Democratic women to let them know that their state legislators were not just getting ready to vote against transgender people, they were getting ready to vote against every woman and girl in the state. And the concession that we made, which was not initially an amendment in the bill, was that Republicans got a set number of seats of appointments from the governor when the council would get made. And whoever the minority leader was in the House or the Senate at the time would also get some appointees. And I thought that was fair. I actually didn't think it was a bad concession. They did think very differently on things, but there were a lot of things that we agreed on, like women's health care, like closing the pay wage equity gap, like sexual assault awareness on college campuses. Those were things that we found common ground on. And now we forced Bruce Rauner to sign it into law, and it is Juliana Stratton's premier initiative in the lieutenant governor's office, and she's done an amazing job carrying that work on.
Wow. Okay. Um, you've hinted at this a little bit before, but now I'm just going to ask it more directly. Since you've run before for the district and got very close, can you say something or speak to the issue of what you think might have cost you those other previous elections, and
Yeah.
what you learned from that, what you're doing differently in this campaign to try to address whatever you saw as the reasons?
That's a great question. So 24 was a very difficult primary cycle for Democrats and for progressives. If you all remember, 2024, Cori Bush lost her seat, Jamal
Yes.
Bowman lost his seat. Here on the local level, a lot of progressives were pushing for Clayton Harris. He didn't win against a more moderate Eileen Burke. We had the Bring Chicago Home referendum on the ballot that we lost, right? We made some gains, but we lost it ultimately. It was a tough cycle. And it was the actual lowest voter turnout we had seen in Cook County in 20 years, which did not help insurgent candidates because we know when it's a lower voter turnout, it typically helps incumbents versus insurgents. And, Marianne, I made some tough political calls and took some hits in that election cycle. That was the election cycle that APAC came in and spent $500,000 on a smear campaign against our campaign because I took a very firm stance on a ceasefire. Um, Immediately, November 2023, I was arrested with 130 other community members outside of the Israeli consulate calling for a ceasefire because we knew what would happen if what continued. Um, and what was interesting about their smear campaign was that they sent all these mailers out saying that I was a defund the police candidate. And do you want to know why they said that? Because I called for the abolition of ICE all the way back in 2020, my first time I ran against Congressman Davis. So
2020.
our campaign has had the foresight, the political intuition, and the political courage to call for very difficult stances in political climates that were not always advantageous to us. But to me, it's not about what's politically expedient, it's about what's morally correct. And when I called for the abolition of ICE in 2020 and then it got used against me in 2024, um, I did it because I knew that ICE was a racist police tactical unit that was going to tear our communities to shred if we let them run wild with no oversight. And so that was really where we lost some folks. And in the meantime, Marianne, in this election cycle, I've had some community members call me back and said, you know what, Kina, you were right about calling for a ceasefire. You know what, Kina, I thought you were too radical, but you were right to call for the abolition of ICE when we had the opportunity to try to stop them before what has happened has happened. And I think that in the arc of standing and ending state sanctioned violence and these very difficult decisions that I've had to make, the core of all of that is that you have to have a sense of forgiveness and you have to understand that, like, we can't do this. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies. If we're building coalitions, sometimes we spread apart, sometimes we come back, right? And so this is the phase where people are coming back in because they are experiencing what I was trying to call to prevent. And I have to say this one last thing, and we can go to the next question. Democrats have a problem with comms, getting our messaging out before the Republicans come in and conservatives come in and create this echo chamber. But we also have a problem listening to Black women in our party in leadership positions. We don't trust Black women as a party, and we don't listen to them. Us, even though we are the strongest voting bloc in the Democratic Party. And I do need to highlight that because I think that in light of experiencing Donald Trump right now, there's a lot of people regretful about Kamala Harris when she ran, right? And it's interesting that 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris because she was warning us about what was going to happen. It didn't mean we agreed with everything that she said or that that all of us liked her. It was just that what was common sense at the time. And so I do think that there's a political reckoning happening across the country, not just in Illinois 7, where people are revisiting political stances that they thought were radical, but in actuality, it was coming from a place of vulnerable communities who knew that uh, entities like ICE could be very harmful to our communities, and so that was the political hit that I had to take, Marianne, and I'm back in the ring swinging about it again because I just could not live with myself sitting on the sideline as the seat finally had become open and we have an opportunity to take this district in another direction.
Thank you. Um, so, knowing that your interest is in particularly in gun violence prevention education, we've experienced a time when Trump has thrown out a lot of the programs that dealt with gun violence. Given that situation, how has that impacted your organization, or that I know it's got the new name, and its work, and when if you made it to Congress, what programs in that area would you seek to restore or introduce?
Well, I've always viewed gun violence as a public health crisis. And, I got into the gun violence prevention space because I witnessed a young person gunned down in front of me in the Austin community as a child. I knew the victim, I knew the shooter, and it didn't just change the trajectory of my life, it gave me my mission in life. And I knew that the bullet was flying long before anybody pulled the trigger. And so when I say that this is a public health crisis, the bullet is flying when we shut down public schools, when there's lead in the water, toxins in the air, when there are no jobs. All of those things are the bullet flying. And our district actually holds 26% of all gun violence in Illinois happens in our district, in the Illinois 7, our tiny little district. And so this is a crisis across Illinois 7. Um, I mean, the funding cuts have impacted everybody because, as I said, if we look at the more structural violence portion of it, when housing funding gets cut, that's the bullet flying, right? When the EPA gets cut and we can't get clean air, that's the bullet flying. So it has impacted us tremendously. What has been the good news is that a lot of groups on the ground have adopted models of violence interruption, and they've actually been driving violence down here in the city of Chicago organically through mutual aid, violence interruption, and third-party interference without police officers. And so, my campaign chair is somebody very special in the Austin community, a young woman named Aisha Oliver. And Aisha Oliver created the Austin Safety Action Plan with young men between the ages of 14 and 24. And it's right around the Central Lake area in the Austin Town Hall area. And they have driven gun violence down about over 60% in this one block that they're implementing safety zones in, and it's from violence interruption work. And so I'm surrounding myself around people who have a pulse on what's happening in the district and are using tactics that work. On the federal level, what we need to do, I was very proud to serve on the Biden Harris transition team for gun violence prevention and safety and advise senior advisors like Cedric Richmond on things like common sense gun safety legislation with other survivors of gun violence across the country. And my number one request to them was please do not parachute the feds into our community because there is great work happening in the violence interruption space from CRED, which is run by Arnie Duncan, the Nonviolence Institute in the North Lawndale community, the Austin Safety Action Plan. They need the funding to make sure that their street teams are paid and they're hiring them at a livable wage so they can do this work full time. I think on the federal level, when we win the House back, which I think Democrats will win the House back, I think we need to push to open the Office of Violence Prevention again. I was a part of the efforts to open the Office of Violence Prevention on the national level. It has since been closed because of the Trump administration. But we need to reopen that because once again, we can't change what we can't measure. That office helps measure on the national level and then advise the White House on what we need to be doing around federal funding and federal programs. And then of course, my final thing is I want to hold gun manufacturers accountable. We know in the state of Illinois, our gun problem is not a Democrat problem, it's a Republican problem. And what do I mean by that? 85% of our guns are coming from Indiana, Wisconsin, and Mississippi, in states where they are not taking it serious on the state level. And those guns are flowing into our city. There's not a single gunshot, not a single um, gun shop or shooting range in the city of Chicago. So this is not a Chicago problem as they continue to make us a political punching bag. This is an issue of very bad policy choices made in red states, and those illegal guns are flowing into our state. In 2020, CPD collected, I think, 10,000 guns on the streets and a part of violent crimes. 850 of those guns could be traced back to one gun shop in Indiana. One gun shop. So to me, that's the culprit of the problem. And the fact that this industry is so unregulated and never really gets held accountable for what's happening, doctors get held more accountable for malpractice than the gun industry. And so a bartender gets held more accountable. In the case that somebody is drunk and they go out and have a car crash, the bar could get sued, but we can't sue gun manufacturers when mass shootings happen or people get their hands on guns who should not have their hands on guns. And so this is, as y'all can tell, my cross that I will carry for the rest of my life, but it is the fight that I'm going to fight when I get to DC.
That's great. I see that I think I was supposed to open up for questions from
Oh,
the
no,
other
no,
part.
that not necessarily. Sorry, I was just double checking everything was working because I was a little worried nobody had put it in yet. But yes, everybody does appear to be able to see. So it's a good time for me just to say it. I've dropped it in the chat a few times. Yeah, if you have questions for Kina, feel free to message them. Again, you will only be able to chat with me. And Marianne, I do have a question to pass to you from the audience.
Yeah, I do.
But if you have another question you want to wrap up with, um, feel free. We are at about 40 minutes, so
Okay.
that might be a good time to hand off. I know that was abrupt, so like I said, we'll
Um,
give that to you.
so you're handing me a question from the chat?
It looks like Barry has his hand up.
Oh, I can't see that. Okay,
Yeah, actually, that'd be great. Why don't we? I'm going to start with the hand raised,
great.
just because that's always nice to hear a voice. So Barry, I'm about to unmute you, or I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. So feel free.
Okay, so Eric, you need to know that the chat's disabled. People can see your messages, they're not able to respond, at least
Oh,
I'm not
that's
able to.
true. Yeah.
Uh,
Um, a lot of people, I believe I saw your email. That's why I just sent that. A lot of
Yeah,
people
so
are
it's
able to
it's still
respond to,
disabled for me.
it says
Uh,
it.
yeah.
yeah, it says chat disabled.
Um,
So,
I'll work on that, but
okay,
I did get a
so
bunch
my
of mess.
question
Yeah, go ahead.
for Kina, apparently as a candidate, you get a lot of inside information. My question is, which of the other candidates is being funded by APAC? I have a suspicion that it's Jason Freeman because I get like one mailing from him a day, and I get phone calls and texts, and like he's obviously very well funded. But my question is it him or is it someone else?
So, initially, this is a great question, Barry. Initially, Jason Friedman, when his FEC was filed, there were a significant amount of APAC individual donors who donated to him. He did not get the endorsement. City Treasurer Melissa Conyers Irving got the endorsement. And I want you all to pay attention to that because Jason Freeman actually has very strong ties to APAC from our knowledge, from his family members to friends to people who are engaged. But he is not the APAC endorsed candidate, but a lot of people um, donate to APAC coincidentally donated to Jason Friedman. And my suspicion just about that is that APAC has been polling in our district. And they know that the profile of this candidate, this is a touchy topic for a lot of people, but our district is a plurality African American district. It is. And we are coming off the heels of a civil rights icon like Congressman Davis. So, I mean, it would be very weird for the district to, the pendulum to swing so far for that, for the candidate who gets the seat next to not kind of fit that profile. A big swath of the district is the west side of Chicago and the western suburbs. So typically, I mean, Marianne brought it up earlier. The reason why we did so well against Congressman Davis, even when we lost against him by a lot, like we still had a very strong base, was because we had an established base in the western suburbs and young voters on the west side. And APAC is not dumb. They knew that Melissa fit the profile. So instead of going with Jason, they went with Melissa Conyers Irving.
Uh,
Um, and I think you all should be leery of that. Now, here's another interesting point, Barry, that I want to point out because people are saying the money, the money, the money. You have to compete with the money. We have significantly less money than Jason Friedman, and we are polling higher than Jason Friedman.
well, that's
So
good. That's good to hear. And I went to one debate with like 16 candidates, and I was very disappointed in Melissa's behavior. She was talking over people and cutting them off. She was the only candidate that was behaving like that.
yeah, I mean, I think that what is important if people do care about the numbers, I always have measured the strength of a candidate by their in-district support. Our campaign has over 300 individual donors from inside of Illinois 7. It is the most of any of the top campaigns. We do not have the most money. And I'm going to have to say this to Danny Davis's credit. When we really put up that, there were two primary cycles where we raised nearly $1 million against Congressman Davis, and he still beat us. He still beat us because he knew which precincts to go to, he knew where his base was, and he did a relational organizing program that envied anybody's. And so while he looked vulnerable, I think that is an important key to highlight the strength of a campaign based off of the in-district support that that candidate actually has. Because you could raise $1 million, but if you're getting it from outside of the district, it's a turnoff to a lot of voters, number one. And number two, I question if you really have a pulse on the district. Do you really have a pulse about the issues that people care about? Which is why, in my humble opinion, Jason is polling lower than us, even though he has 10 times the money um, than our 20 times the money than our campaign, right? So I just want everybody on the call to take that into consideration. People vote, mailers don't.
And Barry, I'll just say, in response to your question, of that's really become public information that Melissa Conyers Irvin was a recipient of the large. It wasn't direct APAC; it was some fund they hide behind, I think,
It's
called the
independent
United
expenditure.
Democracy Project or something else.
Yes, independent expenditure of $2.8 million. That's $500,000 a week leading up to election day. Everyone should be concerned about it. And you are right, Marianne, it's under United Democracy Project, which is tied to APAC.
Right.
And that was the same, entity that came in and spent money against me in the previous election cycle.
Ah. Um, well, I see Eric sent me a question that he's interested in having me ask you, and that's it. What will you do as far as accountability for the Trump administration if you become a member of Congress?
We are
What's your
going to
idea?
do the pants off of the Trump administration. um, I think that there are a lot of great folks that are utilizing every lever that they can. And I know the courts are becoming less reliable too, depending on where, the circuit courts are. But I think that we need to be slapping them with litigation left and right, because as we've seen, some of this litigation has actually stuck and it's actually worked. And I think that we cannot abdicate our responsibility to organize people. The way the ACA got saved was that people came to their senator's office on Capitol Hill and they sat outside those doors and said, don't do that. Right. And so that's on a broader scale, on a more micro scale. Of course, I would want to leverage my power on appropriate committees to hold his administration accountable. Um, and we could do it that way. But I think that right now we need to utilize our Constitution as much, the federal precedent, legal precedent that has been set, and we need to sue the pants off the Trump administration.
Um,
1 second here. So just a clarification. Yeah. So the chat, if you try to chat to everyone, that is disabled, and unfortunately that does not make it to me. So unfortunately, if you want to ask a chat, you'll have to click new chat and then DM me directly, and I am Eric Johnson. Sorry about that, everybody.
Or can they just come off mute, Eric?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you want to just raise your hand and ask a question to Kina directly, feel free to do that as well. Thank you.
I don't know. Can you see raised hands? I can't see everybody, but
I don't see any raised hands.
okay.
Yeah,
Well,
no
then I
raised
have
hands
another.
yet.
None, yes, no.
Yeah, no raised hands yet.
Okay, let me, then I got, Eric has got a second chat question. You mentioned your relationship to the Sunrise Movement and the importance of environmental justice earlier. But one of your progressive opponents was endorsed by the Sierra Club. I don't know what you think about that or what can you say
I
more about your commitment and plans for environmental justice?
No, I think that like the Sierra Club picks who, I mean, that they have a governing body. I mean, I would argue that we were more progressive and to the left and energized when we ran against Danny Davis, and the Sierra Club still chose Danny Davis, so I don't know if that's a measurement of, who's going to have the best ideas or who's more plugged into the district. I plan on working specifically around infrastructure in the district. We got to get this lead piping together. And there are portions of Illinois 7 in the provisos in the western suburbs and Maywood and Bellwood and North Lawndale and Austin where we have higher levels of lead than Flint, Michigan. And so I'm a resident of Austin. We are ingesting that water and having to use that water. This is a personal issue for me. It's the difference between whether my nieces and nephews will have developmental issues or not in their formative years. And so I think that that's the first thing. I think the second thing, and that voters, working class voters care about in Illinois 7 is a green economy and building up a strong local economy. And I think $23 trillion in the next 10 years for green energy. It's going to be a tremendous boom of money happening in green energy. We need to make sure how much of that money is actually coming to frontline communities like Illinois 7. And I think you have to, pass things like the Competes Act to make sure that we bring manufacturing back to Illinois 7. And then we have to stand with the community and solidify community benefits agreements to make sure that people are not just building on contaminated lands and developing data centers in our community and harming people from an environmental standpoint. Um, but I don't necessarily know if endorsements means you're the most. I think everyone in this race has basically said the right things on environmental justice. I think this comes down to the relationships and the actual district. There are amazing earth remedies. Mercedes, a young woman named Mercedes in the Garfield Park community, started Earth Remedies, and it's a Black-led coalition of environmentalists on the West Side. And Mercedes is a huge supporter of my campaign, and we talk all the time about how we live in a food desert, and we want to build up community gardens to teach people how to produce their own food, right? In the community. And I think that's something that we could also implement through the USDA on the federal level and investing in communities like the Illinois 7. So I have a lot of ideas and plans around what I want to do around environmental justice, but they mostly and primarily focus on infrastructure and building up a strong local economy as a reparations to frontline Black and Brown communities that are being ravished by environmental racism.
I just thought of another question. I know a lot of your supporters are young high school, college students. Have you seen, and you've also focused on working with the youth, what are they like this time around? More enthusiastic, less
Oh my goodness.
enthusiastic? What are you seeing?
Oh my goodness. We just, first of all, our campaign is the only campaign that has held a youth town hall. So I'm gonna need my colleagues to get on it. And that's not a dig at them. It's just that I want to engage them and have them, have young people engaged so that they have a myriad of choices. I mean, they have 13 candidates to choose from. Um, but at our youth town hall that happened at Austin Town Hall, there were 100 youth that showed up and organized this youth town hall. And they asked me questions that spanned from environmental justice, gun violence prevention, healthcare, and the Jeffrey Epstein files. I mean, they are paying attention to what is going on in this country. And they grilled me, they put me on the spot. And now those, 100 students have been converted into our volunteers. Um, and I think that it is a great honor and privilege to have them in a co-governance model with us, right? Because you want to get this in place now, give them leadership opportunities now. So, that if we get elected, great. They're already plugged in. If we don't get elected, great. We build up a community organization or a program where we bring in more young people and get them civically engaged. So this has been a win-win, and they are fired up, y'all. They're fired up. They dragged their parents to the youth town hall. They were fired up. But 100 young people at Austin Town Hall this past weekend, and like I said, we're the only campaign that's hosted a youth town hall out of the 13.
I got another question from the chat. Why do you think the majority of Black Chicagoans voters in the 7th district voted for Willie Wilson? This would be the mayoral campaign. Is it hard to capture the votes of Black Chicagoans as a progressive?
Let me tell you something. Willie Wilson has the retail politics part down. He's the reason that he has taken them is not strictly just because they can't be swayed by common sense progressive policies. It's because he is in community and relationship with them. And it's the same way that we can make the argument, how did Zoran Mondani switch Trump voters over to his voters? It's because Zoran came up with a model where he was in every borough and he was knocking on doors and he was engaging. This is not rocket science. I really don't think the Trump administration didn't win by a mandate. Their base was more fired up. I don't think that the pipeline is from Republicans or conservatives to Democrat or MAGA to Democrat. I think it's turning the non-voter into the voter. We are competing with the couch. We are competing with people who are sitting out. And the people who know how to pull the people off the couch and engage them. And this is the thing, Willie Wilson is a self-professed Republican, right? Willie Wilson bails people out of jail. So you support an element of ending cash bail, right? Willie Wilson is at the churches. He's filling up people's tanks. He's giving grocery stores. He's talking about the property tax hike, that he's helping people pay their property taxes that have went up 136% in places like North Lawndale. So people are coming to Willie Wilson with problems and he's producing solutions for them. Does it mean that he's the best candidate and has the best ideas? No, I've never voted for Willie Wilson. But what I will give Willie Wilson is that people don't know how to campaign like Willie Wilson. They are afraid of the working poor in this city. They are afraid of going into Black neighborhoods, knocking on the doors, getting in front of the people, touching the unhoused, and pulling them into their campaign infrastructures. And really, people are clamoring to be seen and to be heard. The Black community has been so neglected. So this is not a Republican issue in Chicago. A lot of these bad policies that have been put in place that have hurt Black Chicagoans were put in place with Democrats in positions of power. And Willie Wilson is striking to the heart of the things that they care about. Well, my argument and my theory for the case is I think I can strike to the heart of some of these folks. I'm not afraid of my neighbors, right? But I don't think that we can just say that they're all into Willie Wilson's ideas. I think that they trust Willie Wilson more than some other candidates. And that's ultimately how people win elections.
Thank you for that. And the next question from the chat is
You're a little bit drowned out, Marianne. I can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
In our forum with Dr. Fisher, He said he would envision himself serving in this office for maybe 10 years and then yielding to a younger candidate. What are your thoughts about how long members of Congress could serve? How long are you thinking you might want to stay in the seat? What's your long range vision for yourself and for the office of Illinois 7?
I'm gonna tease Dr. Fisher because he's older than me.
No, he'll be ready to retire.
Right. Um, I think that's right. I think a decade is right. And I think that we should self-term limit ourselves out. We've seen great models of that with people like Amaya Pawar, who was the alderman on the north side of Chicago. He did, I think, 2 terms as alderman, and he promised that and he left. And I think a decade is a lot of time to get things done. And so I do support term limits, and I don't support lifetime appointments to things. I don't think that leadership is for a lifetime. I think we're missing a critical, I think Democratic Party leadership is missing a critical part of leadership, which is a stage called mentorship. They need to learn to step into grace in that mentorship piece and let other people come in because it that's what the Republicans are doing. They are running younger candidates, snappy candidates, candidates that are populists for their agenda, and they're winning, and that's how they've won. And so once again does not make their platforms right. I don't agree with them, but the model of not letting people die in these seats, um, I mean, that should be normalized. I think you should enjoy your golden years and you should be a mentor. Before you pass on, you should pass down the knowledge that you have so that we're not stuck figuring all of this out on our own. Right. So I agree with Dr. Fisher on that. I think 10 years is more than enough time.
Oh, Marianne, I think your audio might have
What
cut
is
out.
this? I haven't changed it anything.
We can hear you now.
Okay. Guns are, as you know, I'm sure, the leading cause of death since 2021 of young people. And the major driver is suicide.
Yep.
How do we address that problem?
We need to expand mental health services. And we need to actually have trauma investment in trauma informed care. We need to remove school resource officers out of schools and put school counselors in there, right? We have to reimagine how we're viewing our society and what policy choices we are making. And that's 100% true, is that assault weapons are not the number one ways that people are dying with guns. It's handguns that people are getting easy access to, and they are not getting the help that they need as they're going through mental health crisis. This is also an issue of military personnel and police officers, right? That have access to these weapons. We see the Pentagon budget constantly being expanded, even when they don't ask for it, even when they don't pass an audit for 8 years. And that money is going to defense contractors and not to the VA, not to extending help to folks who need it, who are actually exposed to PTSD. And so, um, this is something that I advocate for. It was something that we talked about on the Biden-Harris transition team when we pushed to put more restrictions on ghost guns because now people are building guns in their homes, right? And so as we are in an ever-changing scientific and technological world, these are things that we have to understand that once again, that gun violence is a public health crisis and there's intersections to this. And so for me, the answer to that is investment in wraparound services, trauma-informed care, more restrictions on things like ghost guns. And if we're going to expand the Pentagon budget, and first of all, we should be slashing it, and we should be putting that money back into services for people to get healthcare services, particularly and primarily around mental health.
Thank you. Is there another chat question? Yes. We're only a few weeks away from the primary election. If people are on the fence about volunteering for a campaign, is it more or less too late now? If a candidate wins the nomination, is there much more to do after the primary in this district since it's so blue?
Oh, March is our race, y'all. That's our election. That is our election. It is not too late. It's only March 23rd. You got until March 17th, a little under a month, to get out there, sign up on somebody's campaign and get involved. And let me tell you, we got a ton of things you can do on our campaign. There's a ton of folks to text. There are postcards to write. There are doors to knock. There are people, if you live in a high rise, to talk to your neighbors. I mean, you should be building out a field strategy for your election day game plan, right? We'll be knocking and dragging people to the polls. We'll be knocking on their door on election day, saying, "Hey, did you know there's an election today? Come, this is your polling place." So there's a lot that you can do from now until election day. And actually, this race is actually not sold up. It's not. It's really a dead heat, and it could be anybody's race depending on what happens from now until March 17th. And so I implore you. I just have to say this about the progressive space, and then I'll leave it alone. I've been very disappointed in the progressive left in Chicago in this election cycle, and I'm gonna be honest. You cannot leave it up to campaigns and candidates to decide to consolidate. Sometimes the groups have to make the tough choice and just pick a candidate and get behind them and let people be mad about it because too much is at stake for us not to decide in this moment. Um, and there are a lot of great candidates. Some of the candidates in our race, they're great candidates. This was the wrong race for them to run in. Other candidates don't have an infrastructure. Other candidates, they're too moderate for a district that is the median age is 35. We are D plus 34, progressive leaning district, and we want to go in a different direction, right? So I really, would want the progressive space to make a choice, even if it makes folks upset, because I mean, it would be very sad on election day if we get to March 17th and one of the progressives lose by 500 votes because we didn't get out the vote. And so it is not too late for you to join. It's never too late for you to join. And there's still work to do after the election is over.
You're not just going to relax after the primary. Yeah, I think that's what they meant. Any other questions from the group, from the audience?
I see Ellen's
Yeah.
hand is up.
Oh, there's a hand. Excellent. Thank you, Kina. Thank you for watching. I was just about to send one. Okay. Ellen, I will ask you to unmute.
Hi. Thanks so much for talking with us, Kina. I don't exactly know how to phrase this question, but I'm wondering if you can maybe expand a little bit more on what you were just talking about, because my concern is that the progressive voters are going to split their votes and that will lead us to a less progressive candidate being successful. Is that kind of what you were saying? And like, I guess what I'm asking is like how concerned should I be about that?
I think that progressive voters will first off with the from the earlier thing that I talked about, like Fisher's internal poll that was came out that's public now. It's actually showing that the moderates are splitting their votes. Actually, we keep forgetting in this particular election, there are about five moderates in this Illinois 7 race. And then there are like a handful of progressive candidates that are, have strong platforms but are less known across the district. So I would say that the moderates are actually splitting the vote more, and that vote will be split if progressives don't decide. My rule of thumb is very simple. When the candidates and the campaigns don't consolidate, the voters must. The voters must consolidate and say, hey, we like y'all. Y'all's platform are just fine. We think this candidate has the best shot. That's not personal. That's not an indictment on them. That is strategic. When are we going to get to the place in the progressive space where we're talking about building power? We're talking about building power. What we decide to do in the next 23 days will determine what we do in the next 23 years in this district. So get uncomfortable just for a little bit for you to get glory on election day and get a progressive in there. But y'all have to choose who that's going to be, right? And as I said, our theory of the case is that we are battle tested, consistent, persistent, have the tenacity, got knocked down, got back up, came back to the progressive space. And like, it's not going to be on the job training for us when we get to a very hostile DC on day one. I think we have the most name recognition. I know we have the most name recognition of any progressive in this race. And once again, that's not an indictment on anybody else's campaign. I think I could tell you a litany of great things about all the progressives in this race. We don't have enough time. So this is about building power, being strategic, and the resources that we have and the time that we have. So that's my takeaway from analysis of it all. Julie has her hand up. Sorry. I can see the
Eric, are
hands.
you on that?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
another.
sorry.
Oh,
I
go ahead.
was helping rework somebody's question from the chat. Thank you, Kina.
Oh,
One
sorry,
second,
sorry,
Julie.
Eric. Let
No,
me
no,
let
no,
you do
you're
your
go ahead.
job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I was looking down, just kind of retyping some things. All right, Julie, I am unmuting.
Thank you. Yeah, I was finding it hard to type fast enough, so I just figured I would try this instead. Um, Republicans, conservatives have developed a reputation and basically more or less like the I don't even know how to phrase this right now, but anyway, they have had a pattern. There we go. Of using tactics that are not conventional in the traditional U.S. politics space. They've really delved into a lot of things that would either be considered hardball or questionable, things in bad faith, etc. If you were able to get into this office, what would you do to counter that? And are you willing to play any of those hardball tactics? Because that is one of the things that a lot of people have criticized establishment Democrats for not being willing to do, especially like back when the Obama administration was trying to appoint Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, and Mitch McConnell stonewalled the whole thing allegedly because it was a few months before the election.
Let me tell you, I don't think they're ready for a young woman from the West Side to come to DC for real. Because I think this needs to straight up, we need to take the gloves off. Because I am not so to answer your question very bluntly, Julie, I want to make sure I say it right. I'm not a strongly worded letter type Democrat. I'm a let's take it to the street type Democrat because I know that our policies are far more popular. It is not a radical idea to say we need universal health care or we need to protect voting rights in this country. That's actually the centrist idea. That's a moderate perspective of things. And so I think that the way that I've expressed that and shown that to voters in the district is that I wasn't afraid to go against Danny Davis, who is very beloved. The respectability politics went out of the window when the urgency rose that I could see that our party was collapsing and we could potentially lose the House, lose the Senate, and lose the White House. And then we did, right? And it's because we're not winning the messaging game. We are always on the defense. We are constantly placating to the echo chamber that they create. When Republicans take our ideas and then they spin, defund the police or woke or any of these things that were established as accountability metrics for a lot of the BS that they're pulling in Washington, I think we need to elect somebody who's going to call it like it is. And the only person who can do that on our side, when we think about that, has to be a candidate that is not taking corporate PAC money, who is not being bought and paid for by special interest groups. So you could have the attitude that you want to be a fighter to the Republican Party and opposition, but really it's two sides of the same coin when you're doing the same thing. A good plan, though, ultimately, just to land the plane on this, Julie, is not it's not a good talking point to just say Trump bad, vote Democrat. I'm just going to fight Trump. That's not a good talking point. People want to know, how are you going to help me keep food on my table and keep the lights on? My child can't walk to school without the fear of them being shot, right? My taxes are through the roof. We always have money to go to war. We never have money for investment. And so those are the things that we have to give people something to fight for and to fight about, right? And the opposition to Trump is that we are truly centering the voices of working class people. We are building a multiracial, multi-generational coalition, and that we don't let them slip and slide on things that they do, because it's outrageous, some of the stuff that Democrats let them get away with. You let him tear up the White House to build a ballroom. You let him do it and get away with it. So I think a lot of this is that they've called chicken on the current Democrats, and we are constantly on the defense for very awful things that they're doing, and it needs that part of it needs to change.
Thank you. Okay, I see another question in the chat. This is pretty long
No,
preview here,
it's
so
fine. I'm
Yeah.
good on time.
yeah.
Okay.
Currently,
Yeah.
parents.
Sorry, Marianne. 1 second. I was going to ask you, Kina. How long do you have?
I'm good
Yeah.
on time.
You want to go to 8:30?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that works.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so a long question. Currently, parents and caregivers of adult children have no rights and no clear path to getting help, creating a plan for how to approach their adult child about a severe mental health problem, and that the adult child might be in denial about. We've seen that publicly, even with somebody like what the Hollywood guy, whose kid just murdered his parents. Rob Reiner, his
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
So adult child with mental health problems, parents don't have that many tools to deal with it. So the question is, the chat contributor says this problem is compounded when the adult child's mental health problems results in them reacting violently. Involving the police is not the solution, especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. What kinds of things might you do to help address this problem?
This is work that I worked on when we were fighting for justice for Laquan McDonald and Haretha Gustis and Rakia Boyd, right? It's the reason why we fought for a federal consent decree with the police departments, because they often were sent out in crisis situations like this, and were made to deal with it, which oftentimes resulted in young Black people being shot and killed. And so my approach has always been, I come from a space, because I've done gun violence prevention work. It is intimately linked with criminal justice reform work and transformational justice, because we know that the more times that an individual is incarcerated or arrested, it raises their risk of homicide, being a victim of homicide. A lot of people don't know that. And so what I can offer is making sure that organizations like NAMI are properly funded, right? And working in partnership. We need to incentivize more social workers to go into the field. Our social workers are burnt out in this country and they're underpaid. And making sure that they can make a livable wage it would expand that field. But I also think that there are several models happening across the country where, and we've even implemented some here in the city council, where we're putting response centers in place when people call the police, to send out social workers or trauma informed care or trauma specialists out, or mental health specialists out instead of the police. And I would be in favor of funding programs like that in cases where people are calling in a mental health crisis. And typically, as we know, parents and family members are the ones that typically call for their loved ones when situations like that happen. But sometimes it's actually the person who is in crisis who is calling, right? And so we want to be able to make sure that we're training folks to go out and de-escalate those situations. That's a lot of the work that I did around violence interruption work. How do we de-escalate situations between parties without involving the police? And so that is my political praxis. We need to do things like decriminalize homelessness, right? We know that a lot of our unhoused neighbors and friends are battling mental health issues or substance abuse issues. And instead of looking at it as a public health crisis, um, the response has to be punitive in the measures of how we treat folks. And so, in ways that we can be rehabilitative and we can de-escalate without involving the police. I know that those programs require a ton of money. There are some models that have been rolled out on the county level, on the city level. And once this pendulum swings here, on the federal level, we want to make sure that we're fighting for those dollars to bring them back and that we're properly advocating and being educated by the proper specialists on how to best inform our government on solving these problems as well.
See if I have any other additional questions. I have not.
If anybody else has a question they want to raise their hand for, feel free. Otherwise,
I
we
think,
will.
Did I do my
Yeah.
job?
yeah. Oh, no, this is great. I mean, if everybody else, if no one else has a question, I have one final one.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then we have a final one to end. It should be a quick one, but yeah, go
Oh,
ahead,
no.
Marianne.
So well, maybe that's the one you're talking about, Eric. Who is your currently favorite pop culture personality?
Oh my goodness. I have to say, Nene Leakes from The Real Housewives of Atlanta is one of my favorites. But I love this new Michelle Obama. I mean, she is just so unfiltered now and like really speaking her mind about things. And I'm happy to see her in this phase of her life because I grew up as a young woman watching her. And now it's like seeing her in another phase outside of being first lady and stepping in, finding her voice, well, establishing her voice outside of politics. And I think she's just doing a lot of great work, giving a lot of great advice to young people. And it's cool to see the evolution of a very powerful woman, like still happening, even in her, 50s, right? Like that's just really cool and it's really inspiring. But Nene Leakes of the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Any
Awesome.
musicians? Any musicians? Any
Of
singers?
course, I mean the Queen Bee, Beyonce. I mean, I went to the Renaissance concert in Soldier Field. I went to Cowboy Carter in Vegas. I think that Beyonce is also in an era because I grew up listening to Beyonce as a little girl in the 90s, and now to see her as a mother, a wife, independent, I mean, a solo artist. I love her this kick that she's on about the Renaissance, Black folks reclaiming musical genres that we made popular, and then people appropriated it from us and took it. And so she's reclaiming those spaces of country music and house music. And I think her third album will be rock and roll. So I'm excited to see what Beyonce does next. So the Queen Bee, always.
Great. Eric, did you have anything? Another one?
There was, yes, there's somebody with their hand up, so we'll
Ah,
go back to maybe a more serious question.
okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
Kina, can you say anything about the broader crisis in care, both child care and elder care?
Yeah. It's not covered in our healthcare system, and it should be. And we can pay for that. Barry, we can pay just if we took 10% of this military budget. We could fund universal health care and Head Start in this country. And so many people are saying that this is a moonshot and that it is impossible. Well, of course, if we never start, And I think that this conversation of long-term care, not just even long-term care, but disability rights being injected into a culturally competent Medicare for all healthcare system is we can't divorce the conversation of healthcare from those things. Um, I support things, non-traditional forms of things like doulas during pregnancies, right? Black women are dying at a six-time rate of anybody else. Of one of the most natural things that you should be able to do is to give birth. And it's because we have an implicit bias in our healthcare systems. And doulas come in as advocates. In the same way, I think we could have death doulas for long-term care and people who are aging out and in final stages of their life, right? It is a very uncomfortable conversation for people, and I think that your health insurance should cover it, right? I don't think that you should be coming out of pocket. We are in a stage and in an era where people are paying more and getting less in their health care, and it is a scam. It is a scam. We saw from the big ugly bill that was passed, some people's premiums went up $1,000. So if this administration is serious, and goes back to the earlier question Julie had about how do we hold this administration accountable? If this administration is serious about a strong workforce and economy, people need childcare. You should want people to get educated. You should want them to be able to propel and get promotions at their job. If you are serious about a strong economy, we should have a healthy economy. People should not have to feel like they are one illness away from losing everything. And so, thank you for highlighting that, Barry, because I think that long-term care and disability rights cannot be separated from the conversation of Medicare for all and a universal healthcare system. And not even just getting to that stage, the current healthcare system should include it. The current healthcare system can do it right now. We don't have to wait for some moonshot. We could do that in our fiscal budget right now. And so this is a policy choice that is being made. And the way that we continue the future of a strong economy, we build up smart kids. We invest in Head Start. We invest in universal child care for our parents. So that is something that I'm very passionate about, and that was included in the work that I did on the Illinois Council on Women and Girls Act because I had working moms that were on the council with me, and that was a big barrier for them. We have people paying 60% of their checks are going towards rent, another 30% going towards childcare, 50% going towards childcare. That is outrageous. That is outrageous, and it's criminal. If we can bail out millionaires and billionaires in Wall Street, then we can bail out Main Street. And I think it's time we make an investment in working families.
Well, we've got another couple questions coming from
That's
people
okay.
that
I'm here.
okay. The questioner asks, I'd like to know what your top priorities are for strengthening public education and how would you ensure federal funding is targeted to schools with the greatest need?
Yeah, this is personal for Illinois 7. When we dealt with 10 years ago, the largest public school shutdown in American history, 29 out of the 50 schools that were shut down in Illinois 7. So the first thing that we have to protect is the Department of Education. That's number one, as we are seeing it be gutted. And what we have to reinstall is our Civil Rights Department and the Department of Education, because that was the department that helped monitor a lot of this. I am particularly zoning in and zeroing in on the IDEA um, Act, which is money that is set aside specifically for children with disabilities in our education system. We know they are the most vulnerable in the school populations, and no one is talking about how IDEA has been snatched from these schools. Of course, we want to increase Title I funding. And I think there's a strong case in Illinois 7. We are a donor state. We pay more in federal taxes than we get back in federal resources. But we dealt with, once again, the largest public school shutdown in American history and in our district. And it disrupted a lot of things in the city of Chicago. When I meet young men in my neighborhood in Austin who are 17, 18, and 19, and they may be participating in an open air drug market, do you know what I see? I see little 7, 8, and 9-year-old boys who never had a proper neighborhood school. They never saw an investment from our government into their neighborhood and into their education. And they're smart as all daylights. They're smart even now, but they never saw that investment. And so I think that that story needs to be told in Washington, D.C. I think that we need to see our children as brilliant and as a proper investment. And I think, we need to make sure that we're fighting to restore the Department of Education, expand Title I funding, protect IDEA funding. Um, and like I told y'all at the beginning of this, we need to sue the pants off of the Trump administration. This is a civil rights violation. They know that education is the great equalizer. And so what the Republicans did was play the long game and the wide game. They started with critical race theory, and then they started with the book bans. Then they started stacking up school boards, and the next thing we know, what happened? DEI rollbacks and the gutting of affirmative action. So we have to get as savvy and we have to get as gutter as they got, because we know where the opposition is. They do not want the next generation to be educated so that they can fight back. And that is important to me as somebody who graduated through public schools and dealt with PTSD from witnessing murder in my community, and I had amazing educators. And now, all these years later, I'm still one of the youngest Black women in the history of this state to run for Congress. And it was because I had great teachers in my public education system. So it really is a personal fight for Illinois 7.
I see one last question, I think, maybe. We've got just a couple minutes here. If you win this seat, would you invite any of the other candidates into your office to join forces, combine resources as, say, advisors or any other appropriate role?
I'm ready for them to come on day one. Come on over, y'all. One of the things that I've been very fortunate to do as we run several cycles is sit with other former candidates and still keep some of those relationships going. Danny Davis is a little upset with me that I ran against him. We kind of, embarrassed them in 22. But I think that that was more of an indictment on the political atmosphere we were in than anything. I can't take anything away from Congressman Davis's political career. He was a lion, in our Congress. And I think there's a lot that I could learn from him too. So yes, I think we have whip smart people on this candidates list, and I would be ready to work with them on day one. Yes, I would tell them to join me.
Thank you. Unless there are any other questions, I think it's time to wrap it up. It's almost 8:30. I appreciate so much, we all do, that your willingness to stick around till 8:30, a whole hour and a half. I think unless anybody else has anything, thank you again. We wish you the best of luck. Hope we generated some interest in volunteering for your campaign here tonight.
Please. Oh, you all can go to KeenaCollinsIL.com to sign up. So to the person who asked, is it too late? It is never too late to participate in democracy. So please come. And even if you want to just give me a shout after the election, so like just, debrief, let's do it. But sign up to, candidates campaigns, and hopefully it's ours that you are. We would love to connect with y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you so much, everybody. Alrighty. So everybody streams out. I guess that's pretty much it, Marianne. Great job.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Sure, stop. Receive email. Yes. Okay, and then I'm gonna